Hello, how are you two doing? Happy Halloween, Eric.
It's
Eric,
spooky week.
it's
It
spooky week.
is.
Yeah,
It
and I am
is.
a man of my word, and I told someone I would wear a hat, so here I am. Which hat?
It's
There
excellent.
you
You
go.
have already
With
one up both of us, that's what comedy is all about. It's
Okay,
just one
great.
upping
Then
people.
I can put this away. In fact, I can go home because my job here is done.
You've won.
check the box. Eric, we have someone so fun on today. I'm so excited. Amanda, thank you so much for being here. Amanda, tell us who you are, your background, all that jazz, why we're talking to you today, why you don't have a hat, those kinds of things.
Sure.
Tell us all the things.
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here with two
We're glad.
esteemed
Oh,
presenters and just people who are just like the ultimate in their craft. So this is a treat for me. My name is Amanda Austin, and I'm not wearing a hat today because I just washed my hair, and that's not going to be lost on the rest of the audience. So I wanted to make sure people could see that. Um, I formerly owned a comedy club in Dallas for just shy of 12 years, and a lot of what we did there was improv comedy. We also did stand-up, sketch, and storytelling. So you think about a comedy club, you think about shows and, burgers and beer and all that stuff. And that was a big part of what we did. We also developed professional curriculum for like professional development using improv and sketch and storytelling. And I spent years going out and teaching organizations how to collaborate and not be competitive, and how to use that for a tool for innovation. Closed the club during COVID because a fun thing about business is that you have to be open to make money. For those of you who are in a business, own a business, work for a business, have seen a business, you know that money is what keeps a place open. So you have to be open to make that money. So I closed it in COVID, went to work as an HR director for a technology firm that was then acquired by IBM, and got my master's in IO psychology, which is industrial and organizational psychology. And I've heard it described two ways, which is the psychology of people through the lens of business, or the psychology of business through the lens of people. Tomato, tomato, let's call the whole thing off. So that's what I do. And now I'm back out full time doing that, keynote speeches and workshops and coaching and whatnot, and teaching people how to use humor for various different reasons, whether it's like showing up in the workplace, how to be a little bit funnier with presentations, whether you're speaking or you're writing, and then also for like workshops to learn how to collaborate together and be a little more innovative. Oh, and then Libby and I are both adjunct professors at SMU. So we never run into each other on campus, but we could pretend that we do for this particular event, that we are brushing shoulders all the time.
We wear our jackets with our elbow patches. We sit in the library. We discuss the Wall Street Journal every
who isn't discussing the Wall Street Journal daily?
Yeah. Daily. So you went from kind of one end of the spectrum, running a comedy club, to corporate America. So
yes,
tell me how humor shows up or doesn't show up in kind of corporate America when you're wearing your corporate hat. What surprises you about how people use humor or don't use humor in the corporate world?
It's interesting. I think, fundamentally, people are all the same. We need a little bit of levity and we need laughter. And in the corporate world, just having taught these exercises to corporations and then also lived through it, it kind of depends on the vibe of the organization, right? And a lot of that is set at the top with not only just a CEO or the founder, also a leadership team. How acceptable is it to have some humor throughout the day? I think it's also important to understand that I was an HR director, which is not a funny job. There are still ways, though, that you can bring people in, because as an HR director, you're supposed to be a resource for humans, hence the name, human resources. So it's learning when to use it, which I think is the most interesting thing within a corporation, whether it's a corporation of yourself or two people, 200, 2,000, 10,000, whatever. It's knowing when to use it. And then also, I have a couple of rules about using comedy in the workplace, and it's, know when, and then it's the same method with when you think about, here's my HR hat. We don't call people out, right? We call people out for the things that they're doing well, and we call people in for the things they need to work on. So when you're using comedy at work, it's making sure that you aren't calling other people out and making fun of other people. So if your comedy is at the expense of someone else, particularly at work, you will end up in an HR meeting, I promise. So it's making sure
that's called bullying, right? Like when you're
bullying.
using someone else.
It's called a performance improvement plan, or possibly just this is your last day. So it's making sure that you understand you're not using other people at the expense. Like it's reading the room or something that's very shared with the group that they can all relate to.
Okay. So how can people, so if folks are hearing you and they think, okay, this sounds good, I want to be funny, how can they inject humor into their next presentation, their next conversation? If I said, Amanda, I'm going to show up at work tomorrow and I want to be funny, what's one tactical step I can take? Like, do I bust out my knock knock joke book? Do I, do a pratfall? What do I do?
You can do both of those. In fact, I would recommend if you're going to do a pratfall, you're telling a knock knock joke at the same time. It's like A/B testing to see which one works better. So it's like we're going to try both of these at the same time. I was actually thinking about something that you posted a week or two, Libby, a week or two ago. It was it's what you posted. We actually talked about this when we had coffee, the AI generated introduction of you. And just for those who haven't seen it, you need to go back and find it. And Libby had AI generate her standing in front of a crowd. And correct me if I'm wrong here. I think it started with, "Good morning. How did everybody sleep tonight?" Or "How did everybody sleep last night?" Was that correct?
Right. More or less, yeah.
More or less. So that's an insane way if you are giving a speech to open up a speech. However, I told you that I have once started a keynote that way. And the reason I did that is because I was staying in a hotel where the alarm went off at 2 a.m. And so most of the people at the conference, we were all down there in what we probably claimed to be pajamas, right? Or whatever we just could like throw on to be presentable in front of people we were going to see in a suit the next day. So none of us slept well because we all woke up. So I bring that up because that's something that the room or the group can share. And I think it's interesting to think about what's something that they're all that's going to resonate with this group as a whole, rather than trying to be the most like witty, highbrow, look at how smart and intelligent my humor is. I write for all of these fancy like literary magazines and my humor is so witty. How can the group relate? Because there's really just two reasons when you boil it down to why people laugh. Okay. If you go to a stand-up comedy show, you go to an improv show, or you're in a corporate meeting, people laugh for two reasons. The first one is they can completely see themselves in the situation or it resonates with them. So if you're at let's say a stand-up comedy show, somebody tells a joke about like carpooling and you're a parent and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I totally get it." You're nudging your husband. "Oh my gosh, that's so funny. We do this." Right? Everybody's laughing because they can see themselves in it and it's relatable. Right. And then on the other spectrum, people laugh when something is so unbelievable that that it doesn't even make sense to them that could even be a thing. And it's just a wild concept. People laugh because they are shocked because they don't even get it or they can completely relate. And I err on the side in the workplace of doing something that's relatable. Because if we're going for shock value and you are not a trained comedian, even if you are, you might still end up in HR. So always err on the side of relatable. So I use that example from like your speech of like that was not relatable in your simulation, which was hilarious. It happened to be relatable one time for me because somebody hit the fire alarm in the middle of the night.
I love that. And I think that ties exactly what you said a second ago of kind of bringing people in and we're all in on the same joke. It's not me versus you. We are all laughing at this observation together. Yes. So we're not calling anybody out. It's not at anyone's expense. It's a shared experience together.
Absolutely. And you could also call yourself out. So there have been many times that I have showed up and said, "I am so happy to be here. In fact, I'm so excited that I spilled coffee down the front of my jacket. Let's all acknowledge that it's there and let's move on." And I mean, those are true things that happen. I'm a very clumsy coffee drinker. So I have to, and in fact, when I dine out, whenever I'm about to speak, I do the old napkin thing where I tuck it here just because I know it's going to happen. And I have stronger openings than having to call out the food or the drink on me. So, but like call yourself out and bring a little bit of attention to yourself, and rather than trying to poke fun of people in the audience, you want to make them feel like they're part of it as opposed to because the minute they feel bullied or made fun of, or you've kind of like yucked their yum and like you have denied what they have to say or what they're bringing, they're out.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I feel like there's some amount of you're breaking the social contract and you're breaking the feeling of trust in the room by breaking that down. So I want to shift a little bit because you and I, as mentioned, when we're on campus talking about the Wall Street Journal, I teach business presentation techniques. So I teach students how to give a presentation in a corporate environment. One thing I hear consistently from my students, and this could be because they're trying to justify not doing their homework and not
Sure.
preparing. But one thing I hear from them is, well, I didn't want to write a script. I didn't want to write my notes. I didn't want to practice too much because I don't want to sound robotic. I don't want to sound rehearsed, which I think their intention is in the right spot. We want communicators who feel genuine and engaged and like a real human. You have a background as an improviser, yet you do something now where you have to be very polished and prepared. So how do you balance those things, and how do you tell others to balance those things of, I want to be prepared, I want to be polished, but I don't want to be robotic, I don't want to sound scripted? How do you balance those things? How do you tell others how to balance those things?
Excellent question. I used to try and just get by on not rehearsing at all. I used to
Okay.
say, I'm an improviser. I've got this. And I've completely changed my tune in the past several years because yes, I'm an improviser. So that teaches me to be able to be flexible and to pivot in the moment. And I can't do that if I'm not prepared with the actual content. In fact, I feel like there are so many things that are outside of your control when you're giving a presentation, whether it's in class with Libby or you're giving a keynote, or Eric, you're working with a group of people with like your client and you're teaching them. There's so many things that can go wrong, whether it's technology doesn't work, or you show up and they say, hey, we had this big room reserved and now we have to put you in this auditorium and you have all these things and you need space, right? Or the power goes. I mean, there are so many things outside of your control. If you are prepared with your content and you know it like the back of your hand, every other curveball that is thrown your way makes it easier, because you can't focus on things that are out of your control if you haven't focused on the things that are within your control. It is impossible to try and manage that stress, and it'll become very apparent. So I rehearse so much now, to the point it's kind of laughable. It's the same thing that we used to give the note whenever like I would teach stand-up comedy. I would say, you need to rehearse these 5 minutes, like your type five, like we were talking about, Libby. If you don't know that type five like the back of your hand, you should actually hate your material by the time you go on stage, because you know it so well. And that way that lets you relax regardless of what's happening. If there's, in a club, if there was somebody wild and rowdy or drunk in the front row, or if you've got someone in a corporate event who is not paying attention or talking over you, you can handle that because you know your stuff. So rehearse it to the point of hating it.
Yeah.
I mean, I
And
did it on a
Amanda,
plane.
you told us okay, you were about to tell the story about the plane. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tweet, I have, a set list of keynotes, but everything is tweaked for the client to be very specific. So I was on a plane to Boston last month, and my voice notes that where I had recorded it before I left, it wasn't loading. So I was like, well, let me just record it again. And so I sat down and like had the phone up to me with my headphones. Now on a plane, it's very, very loud. So I thought I was whispering, but I was really quite loudly recording myself on the intro of this, and the people around me could totally hear the first 2 minutes of this keynote. But I recorded it and then just played it back and sat there and listened on the plane. I'll listen to it the morning of while I'm getting ready, because it should just be like my favorite Taylor Swift song in my ears. I mean, I should be able to jam out to my own intro so that when I get there, I'm not worried about it. Like, I don't want anybody quizzing me on Taylor Swift lyrics, and I don't want anybody quizzing me on my content. Like, I want to make sure I know it like the back of my hand.
Right. So you are team rehearsal now.
Oh, team rehearsal. But I thought earlier on that I shouldn't have to be because of what I do. And improv is like all about being able to pivot and being present in the moment. And I can't do that if I don't know what I'm talking about. Also, improv troops rehearse all of the time. People take
Right.
improv classes for years and you never get perfect at it. You're continually improving. So who am I to get up there and teach it if I'm not actually rehearsing the way we would ask an improv troupe to rehearse?
That's so, the way you said that just hit home of, oh, I shouldn't have to do this. If I'm an expert, if I'm good at this, if I have something to add, then I shouldn't have to do this. But there's not a professional speaker in the world that doesn't prepare so extensively because you want it to look effortless on
What about an
stage.
athlete? What about
Right.
athletes? Games are not choreographed. They have an idea how it's going to go. What if athletes didn't practice? Like, what if a golfer never went to the driving range or the putting green? He just said,
Amanda,
"I know how to golf. I'm going to be fine." Absolutely not. He has no idea how that game is going to go. He has no idea what
right.
the wind's going to be like. What's the weather? What's the crowd? How is he feeling? He has to do everything that's in his control. So he's got to show up every single day and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, or in his case, practice, practice, practice. So when it's time for that next tournament, he can crush it because he's done everything he can to prepare with what he knows how to do.
You're
Okay,
breaking my.
let's pull
Nope.
this through though, Amanda, because this is really interesting. I'm glad you brought this up.
Is it because is it interesting because you are such a golfer and that's your side hustle, or is it because
no, not at all. It's because I never miss an opportunity to invite Libby into a sports metaphor.
God, I was about to
Because
say,
it's just it's so
my
good.
cardinal rule.
So no. This is I'm so glad you brought this up, because when you look at the routine of an athlete,
right?
it's like practice, 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 practice. It's like 10 to 20 times the amount of practice, and then game day, and then
Mhm.
practice again, and practice again, and then game day. Now contrast that with corporate America. How much practice do you see most presenters and leaders and people who are expected to have executive presence? How much practice do you really see them getting?
Not a lot. In fact, both of you who teach people how to be, a better presenter probably see this. This is probably my biggest pet peeve when it comes to presenting. And this is an example, like a smaller, like microcosm of this whole, they're not rehearsing enough, is when somebody stands up in front of a large group at a town hall or at a conference and they say, "I don't need a microphone. My voice is loud enough." And that is my biggest pet peeve because, yes, we all have the capability to yell. And
Right.
we also know what that does. It takes physically, it takes a toll on our body. And I always say use the microphone because the microphone allows you to just amplify your normal voice so you can focus on delivering the content the way you want to, as opposed to having to yell at the back of the room. That is someone who thinks because I have a loud voice, I can carry this room for an hour or an hour and a half. And I see that that's one example. I see a lot of people who think I'm good. What are the notes for town hall? Or okay, I'm giving the kickoff at the sales conference. Wait, what were our numbers last year? Who's bringing me up?
Right.
Not being able to prepare for that, it's very evident when you get up there, particularly if that person is bookended by someone who is very prepared.
Yes,
Oh,
the
yeah.
contrast you see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm putting myself in the shoes of an executive or somebody who runs a very large organization or a very large team. And something important is that people have trust in that leader and people think that that leader knows what they're talking about. So what do you say to that executive who wants to build trust and is worried that humor is going to undermine that trust or undermine a sense of authority that they have, and they think, well, I don't want to be seen as silly. I don't want to be seen as not taking this job seriously. How do you tell them to use humor effectively and not undermine any trust that they've built?
Wow, that's a great question. I think if you're as a leader, if you're up there trying to deliver a type 5 and make it all about comedy and be just think how funny am I, then you're going about it the wrong way. The
Okay.
the trust that's built with an executive and their audience or like their team is the same as a stand-up comedian or an improviser and the audience in a show. It's all about the tension and release. So if you think about if you were to go see a stand-up comedy show, your favorite stand-up comedian is not every word isn't a joke. There is a buildup and then there's a release. It's tension and release, tension and release. There is a cadence to that. And some people have a different cadence where it's very quick. Some people are more, storytelling, and then they have a little joke at the end. And you are building that same rapport as an executive by create like the tension of something that's maybe a little bit heavier and then ending with something at the end. And that lets people kind of relax and breathe. I would say there are also times, as I noted earlier, that it's not appropriate. If you're about to announce to the organization that you're experiencing a RIF, like a reduction in force, not the time for your type 5 or a funny thing that happened with your son last night at T-ball just to warm the group up. Okay.
Right.
So you have to like be able to read the room and understand, is it even appropriate to joke, or do we need to show up? And instead of worrying about creating levity, it's more about creating compassion in those areas. But I think if you're worried about not building trust and not sounding silly, then you're going at it through the lens of I'm trying to write comedy rather than I'm trying to create a connection, because everybody has a sense of humor.
Mhm.
And which is, and I've seen a lot of people go through classes, and there are some people who probably have a better sense of humor than others, but your sense of humor is not how you tell jokes and how funny you are. It's what you find funny and what you connect with. It's like how you're receiving it as opposed to necessarily the delivery of it.
And I think the focus is so important because I've given so many presentations where, and I'm embarrassed to say this out loud, I've given so many presentations where I think about one person and one person only, and it's myself. And I think things like, I want to sound smart and I want them to know that I'm prepared and all of these things. And that's not a good presentation versus thinking about how can I be in service of the audience? What are the questions that they're going to have? And how can I make sure that they have the information? What are the concerns that they're going to have? And how can I get in front of those concerns, thinking about them? And so I think it's a great point. If you're putting the focus on yourself and how can I be funny and how can I be hilarious, then the focus is on the wrong spot. It's not going to deliver in the same way of, okay, I need to think about the audience. I need to think about the situation and the forum. Is this even appropriate? How can I leverage the situation appropriately? So putting the focus back on them instead of, hey, I want to be funny.
Well, that's exactly the philosophy of improvisation. Because if you think about an improv troupe, it's not about going out and thinking, how am I going to be funny with this group of 6 other people on stage? It's how can I set you up to look really good? So a really great improv team is always thinking about how can I volley other people? Because I want to make everybody else look good so that they have the opportunity to spike it, right? And if everybody's looking out for each other as opposed to looking out for themselves, then you have a higher percentage chance of the entire group really crushing it on stage, transferred to work, the group collaborating and innovating in a way that was never possible because they're all supportive as opposed to just tearing each other down and worrying about themselves. Like you should never walk out on stage as an improviser thinking, if I don't get the last laugh or if they don't pull the lights on my line, then I didn't do it. Because then you're not in service to the audience or your team.
Yeah.
Can we talk more about this? Because one of the things that we hear a lot is the term executive presence, and in fact, it's in the title of this webinar. That is a really nebulous and elusive term. It's very hard to define. It's very hard to nail down. Is there something from the field of improv, from the study of improv, that relates to that? Like you were talking about setting others up. Is there a parallel or a corollary theme to what you see in the corporate world that gets defined as executive presence?
Great question. I would say if I was going to define executive presence through the lens of improvisation, it would be as an executive focusing on being an active listener. So even though you're presenting, your presence also shows when you were listening. And we talk about listening to understand as opposed to listening to respond in improv. So being really in tune with your audience rather than standing up there as an executive, whether it's in front of a group in real life or it's a town hall webinar of 2000. How are you paying attention to what other people are giving you? And I also think I think we've gone very far away from executive presence only being focused on professionalism. Like I have to wear a suit. I have to look this way, sound this way. I can't use any of my filler words ever. Sometimes we use filler words. I'm sure I've used my filler words today. I'll go back and watch it and think, well, that's a lot of likes in there. And honestly, I would rather have some of my filler words if it's me showing up authentically. And I also know authenticity gets kind of a bad rap because they say we've got to be authentic. Being a really good executive and having a nice executive presence is being a good listener and being authentic in a way that you're a more professional version of yourself. It's like you've got a little professional veil, but it's still see-through. So it's not a complete 180 of who you are outside, because I would much rather work for or with an executive who is just a little bit different, like a little bit like I said, like a thinly veiled version of themselves, but it's still them. And I'm not getting a very different version outside of work or in a smaller meeting. I don't want to see a Jekyll and Hyde situation.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So we cannot have an improviser on without talking about yes and for at least a second. Can you give us the 30 to 60 second crash course on yes and how we can bring that mentality into our corporate, normal, non-comedy jobs?
Okay. I would love to. I have taken the liberty over the past several years to go against what Webster says as far as the definitions of yes and have created my own. Yes, and is oftentimes heard as agreeing, yes, everything's great. We're walking around agreeing with each other. That is not what yes and is. Yes is acknowledgement. It's not agreement. It's yes, I've heard what you have to say. And then and is support. And I'm going to support that and see how I can help. For example, if someone, I think I wrote a post about this last week. Let me give another example. I would love to, I'm going to throw it back at you all. Can one of you give me an example of maybe something you would hear in the corporate world I'll give you some to kind of prime the pump. We need a launch in Q4, or we need to have 20 new gold toilets put inside of the facility, or just something like that. Like kind of like maybe like something kind of more bizarre like that. I would love to hear. Just throw something at me.
Eric, what do you got?
Well, I mean, my first thought is let's look at our KPIs. We have to strategically drive our KPIs, right? That's always the essence of what we hear about at work. Is there like a bizarre KPI, like we want to reduce year over year cockroach count in the boardroom?
Love it.
Well, duh, why wouldn't you? I would like the cockroach. Okay, yes, we need to reduce cockroach count year over year. And let's talk through what milestones we need to reach to get there, right? As opposed to somebody saying, no, we're going to do that. Okay, what you're doing when you say, and let's talk through it, it's kind of a different version of tell me more. Let's talk through what that would look like, because the worst thing that's going to happen when you talk through how to get rid of or reduce your cockroach count in the boardroom year over year, maybe you're going to reduce the cockroach count. That'd be really nice for a lot of people. More importantly, what you're doing is you're setting up an environment with the person or the people that you are collaborating with, that it's okay to pitch an idea like this. It's okay for us to ideate. Ideas do not equal implementation. So it's kind of, there's this, three-part, it's not really equation, but yes equals acknowledgement and equals support, and ideas do not equal implementation. It's okay to hear the idea, and that whole idea of yes and brings people in, and then it gets them more confident pitching more ideas. So that's what I do in my workshops. I teach you specific exercises and walk you through, a series of these things, so that when you're stuck at work, you can kind of shift the mindset rather than shooting a whole bunch of ideas down. It's more of a, hey, tell me more. And it may be garbage. I mean, you might come to the end of kind of ideating on it and think, this is not going to work, or this is illegal, or we don't have the money, or we don't have the people, whatever it is. The good thing that came out of it is that someone or a group of people felt supported to at least be able to bring a wild idea, or like, I think they call them a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. So let people bring their BHAGs. Let people try and like reduce the cockroach count, because the worst that's going to happen is that you have a group that feels more willing to ideate. And that's what you need. You need people that are being more innovative and collaborative. And you can't do that if you're shooting ideas down. That was longer than 60 seconds. Sorry.
Well, no, I'm glad you explored it that way. And one of the things that I heard, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing, was that there is sort of a natural tendency for someone in a leadership role to respond with more defensiveness, control, like, let's shut this down in the name of focus. Whereas what I'm hearing you say is improv techniques open the door and they broaden the aperture, and they say it's not about shutting it down and controlling it. It's about opening the door and welcoming ideas that can help solve this problem.
And it's a great way to get the ideas out there. There is a lot of value in, now that we have all of these ideas, what are 1, 2, 3 KPIs that we're going to focus on? And then we quickly narrow them down so that we can move forward. Because if you spend all of your time just ideating and yes, and you're going to have so many ideas you don't know what to do with, and, keep track of them, put them in another Excel or do something, right? They're over here and you can use them later. Use this as a way to have a lot of ideas to then narrow down and move forward. Because if it's me and I'm trying to come up with a new product or solve a problem or whatever it is I'm trying to do in my organization, I'd much rather have too many ideas to choose from than to be sitting around that boardroom saying, how the hell are we going to get rid of these cockroaches? Right? You want a lot of ideas, and then you narrow it down, and then you move forward.
And I think it's so helpful, the idea not being implementation, because I think if I heard yes, and that means, okay, well, someone said the cockroach thing and now we have to do that. But framing it as, no, what I'm doing is creating an environment where there can be ideation is so important. It doesn't mean you're losing control of the room, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to bring focus later, but it means that we're letting people talk and letting people ideate, which is so important. Exactly the environment that we need in order to have innovation. So I love that take on it. It's not just automatically agreeing with what somebody else says. It's about letting the conversation happen and acknowledgement. You
have something to say. That's all you're saying. You have something to say, and let's hear more about it. And then after, also, I'll say this one last because I'm watching our time here. The yes and idea of ideating like this and coming up with lots of ideas, it doesn't work if everybody doesn't understand the rules at the beginning of the meeting.
True.
So you have to set those norms and say, okay, here's how this meeting is going to work for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or the next 2 days. And that way we're doing this to go here. So then we can then do this and move forward. And so it's making sure, there are some very clear expectations and norms around how it works.
That makes total sense. Amanda, if people want to find you, learn more about how to be funny, do all the things, where can they do that?
Well, LinkedIn is probably a really good place. I'm usually posting about something that has to do through the lens of comedy. So please follow me there. My website, which is my name, amandaustin.co, is another way to find me. And then I have a cohort starting in January for people who maybe aren't part of an organization where I would be coming in to speak or train them. They want to learn more about how to use comedy in the workplace. So a little bit of presentation skills, a little bit of comedy writing, all through the lens of how you can show up with a sense of humor or really just some levity at work. And that's going to start in January. So yeah, just shoot me a message. I'll add you to the list and I'll send you a link whenever registration is up. It'll be up mid-November. So that's
wonderful. Amanda, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for joining on today. So this is an absolute delight. So thank you all for spending part of your day with us. Eric, Amanda, thank you as well. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see everyone in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for having me.